Hello, everyone. This is Laura Sawinski, CropLife Media Group Editor. And last week we were talking with Stephanie Zelinko, National Agronomist with AgroLiquid. And we were talking about a field trial that AgroLiquid conducted with Extreme Ag last year in 2024, looking at the response of different corn and soybean varieties to in-season potassium applications. And as we were kind of talking about that and certainly talking what's happening this time of year, which as we record this is early July, and we thought this certainly warranted a continuation of the conversation, kind of a part two, if you will. So kind of put together some thoughts and some talking points that I wanted to have Stephanie address. So today we're going to really look at how producers can kind of maximize the returns, mitigate their risks with a strategic in-season nutrient management. I know this was a topic, this time of year, we're kind of in that sweet spot, if you will, right in that mid-season. I know, Stephanie, kind of the folks that we're talking to, particularly last year and certainly with this year too, we see some folks being a little more conservative with what they're doing, and other folks are saying, no, this is not the time to be conservative. So kind of that's what we're hearing. So today, again, kind of wanted to drill down with some of these points and kind of see what you're hearing from the folks that you work with, seeing what's happening in the field. So I'm just going to shoot a couple things out at you, and we'll see where we go. So when you're talking with the farmers, obviously in-season fertilizer applications, it's all about the budget. So I want to kind of address that, and kind of part two to that. If you can give me an example of what that looks like, how can farmers, kind of get that ROI by waiting until, mid-season where we're at now to make these types of things that they need to decide upon. So let's start from there.
Yeah, definitely a budget when it comes to, your entire operation is critical for any grower. If you want to stay sustainable from year to year, you need to fit within that budget. From the fertility side, we encourage guys to kind of pre-plan, kind of predict what you anticipate to get for a yield, what you think you're going to sell that crop for in the fall. And we found that about 18 to 20% of what that anticipated income is what you're going to spend on fertilizer. And so that's how we kind of just figure out that number. And then we look through research data, what your grower is doing, and try to mix and match which nutrients you should be spending those dollars on. And that's going to vary by grower. And that's where, our win rate data and that return on investment comes back into play, that we can look and see what nutrients are more likely to give you that best dollar return, and use that information to help make those decisions on how you should build your overall fertilizer program to fit within that budget.
Okay. I know, obviously, as I mentioned, we're kind of almost mid-July here. And last time that we were talking, we talked a little bit about wet weather, like, the variables, but also like kind of now where we're at, what's changed, what's going on there. And then likewise, like I said, kind of this continuation of the input costs and where does that stand currently? Because I think, maybe where we started out, a couple, 3 months ago and versus where we're at now, some things have kind of come more to light. So talk a little bit about what you're seeing with costs and stuff, and how does that play into things?
Yeah, definitely, commodity prices haven't changed a whole lot. Input prices look like when we're going to that fertilizer in the fall, we hope for a dollar reset to kind of, make things a little bit more manageable. The market's still tight. And so we're not, seeing a whole lot of, positive light that we'll get some better fertilizer prices anytime soon. But there's a lot of economic things that go into play for that. So it's kind of early to make those decisions for next year. But things, don't look to be settling down too much like they normally do this time of year. But what growers can do is, look at those in-season options and then apply fertilizer accordingly. So if you think you're going to get a good yield, you kind of know where that crop is setting up to be. We're probably in reproductive stages or beyond for the majority of the corn and soybean acres across the country. So there's still time to put fertilizer out there. So if you have dollars that you can still invest, now's a good time to work with somebody to figure out, what you can do to push that yield a little bit further.
So you mentioned reproductive mode, I mean, which is kind of where we're at, correct? In this 50%, we're truly at that midpoint stage. So what happens when crops, switch into that reproductive mode? what does that look like? What should the farmer be looking at? Like, what's the signal there, and what do they do? What do they see, and then what's the response to that?
A lot of guys, think that you put your fertility up front, then you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the year. But the biggest nutrient demand, especially on, potassium, nitrogen, actually comes from that reproductive stage forward. So tasseling on corn, potassium's a huge demand on soybeans after flowering. So those are all good key nutrients that you need to look at to make sure you have an ample supply, so we can finish off that crop. A lot of guys, like I said, trying to put the brakes on when the season comes. I think they have their fertility program done. But looking at, how that crop is responding, looking at what that environment is, you still can push it with foliar applications. Foliar potassium on soybeans works really well. On corn, there's a lot of options with the side dress and wide drop applications, as well as foliar that can go out with different technologies that we have. And so there's a lot of key nutrients. Even on the micronutrient side, boron's probably the one that comes to mind first. So all of those are really good options, kind of as a maintenance program to help push that yield as we, approach the end of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that nutrient topic, you mentioned boron, but potassium and sulfur as well, aside from, nitrogen gets all the attention, of course, but it's these other things as well that really kind of give that boost, correct? Is that a good way
It
to frame it?
It is absolutely on corn. Nitrogen's kind of that king that people think that they need to have lots of nitrogen out there to get that top yield. And in all reality, it could be some of those micronutrients or even, the potassium or sulfur that is less commonly thought about that will give you those extra yield or push you over that top.
And the other topic I wanted to talk about, and particularly with this, the wide drop application, getting that liquid fertilizer directly to the roots, to the base of the plant. What are the advantages of that, and how does that play into, again, using the right timing to do this? What's the effect of that?
Yeah, wide drop applications or any kind of application that's going to put that band right along that base of the plant, along the soil there is a great way to get nutrition. Once we hit tasseling, it might be kind of hard to physically get it there, but for those areas of the country that, still have smaller corn, it allows us just to put a concentrated band really close to that root system. You're going to get greater uptake with it. It's also, right where that root system's going to actually use it. We don't have to wait for, certain weather conditions for that leaf tissue to take it in like you would with a foliar application. So you're just putting it there where it's readily accessible to that crop.
Okay. Okay. So you mentioned different ways to apply, et cetera. For instance, like drones, variable rate. How does that play into the strategy as well as, cost savings, et cetera, more targeted application, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. Drone technology, I think, has kind of been a game changer for us in the ag industry. We did a lot of work on it years ago that I didn't think that technology would move very fast. In the last year or two, it's really kind of made an upward spin. And the nice thing is we can get across crops that our ground rigs can't get across. Just due to the plant height, you're not running over plants like you would with a ground rig. And they're a little bit more accessible than planes. Parts of the country can't get, planes or helicopters in, and drones can kind of fit in those pieces as well. So it's a great option. You can mix nutrition with that crop protection. So if you're going out with an insecticide or fungicide, you can, make one shot to save that application fee and get two things done at the same time.
Yeah, just, I'm curious to maybe hear a little bit more about what you're seeing on the drone side. I know we just concluded our survey with Purdue where we look at the different types of ag tech that are in use and which ones. And again, particularly in a year where, again, it's the spreadsheets, it's the bottom line, the number, looking at cost, being very careful and conservative of what we're spending, but we really do see continued use and growth, in particular with drones. What are you seeing? I mean, you said you're seeing more as well. Is there anything else you can add to that? What you're seeing out there in the field?
Well, I think just the accessibility of them. So whether you're owning them, you're on your own farm, which can be a big cost, investment, or if you're hiring somebody, you're paying dollar per acre application fee. There's an expense behind it, but I think the benefit of being able to get across that crop in a more timely manner. So we have a lot of rain, in my area right now. We just got another inch last night. So we're getting behind on spraying, and drones don't have to worry about that issue. They can get out there even when the fields are wet. So I think it's offering more flexibility for growers than was really initially anticipated when that technology came out.
Yeah, 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 that's great. Good to hear. I guess kind of the last thing as we wrap up, and again, this is, more about when you're advising your growers and again trying to look for the strategies that maximize that in-season fertilizer ROI, that, different components. There's, timing, the nutrient selection, how you're going to apply it, right? Drone, ground rig. What are some of the ways, and maybe just talk about this a bit more when you're like looking at all these components that go into a really good strategy for that farmer, for that field, for this time of year.
It is a big puzzle that you have to piece all of those little components together. And so I always like to, talk to a grower and advise them, like, it might be cool to get a drone and get out there and do an extra application. But, if you don't need that fungicide or you don't need, that nutrition, maybe it's not that best investment at this point in time. If we had higher commodity prices and there was, more possibilities there, then yes. So I like to look at the overall picture. How much do they have into that fertilizer program? How is that crop doing? Is it limited on something nutrition wise that we will see a benefit for it? That goes back to looking at win rates and that return on investment, knowing which nutrients are going to provide a return, and then just working with the grower on what that field and that crop needs. So it's really hard to pinpoint one thing because it's kind of a multiple systems approach that you have to look at, cost of application, cost of product, plus potential return, and decide. And at some point in time, growers have to be comfortable with, maybe not investing more in a crop and being happy with where they're at. It'd be great to brag to get 3, 4, 500 bushel corn. But if you're in a growing season for 175 bushel, then you can make money at 175 bushel, maybe be happy with that and try not to push that crop further.
I guess kind of the last question I have for you, if you just had to make a general assessment of what you're seeing right now in your area with the growers, farmers that you work with, where do we kind of stand at this point of the year?
Well, if I look specifically at my growers in central Michigan, I think everybody's pretty happy where things are at. We're progressing well. We've had enough rainfall, almost too much rainfall in some areas, but I'm always hesitant to say there's too much rain because it will shut off at some point in time. So I think growers in central Michigan, really happy where we're sitting right now. The other areas of the country I travel, pretty similar. Some had some late starts and some delays, but I think things are progressing, very well, that we're going to have probably some pretty good crops come harvest time.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Stephanie, so much for dropping in virtually again, and appreciate the conversation. And we'll circle back with you maybe at the end of the season and kind of take a look and see where we're at and what you guys are looking at for next year.
That sounds great. Thank you.